dignity and liberty, no matter which is the caste they belongs and what is the race they belongs, what is the descent they have. In the other side of my history, I have seen and I have experienced the painful discrimination and exclusion from my own society, from my own friends, and from my own community in Nepal, because I was born as a Dalit in a lower caste. Today, the very first day, I would like to share my own history about the caste-based discrimination and painful suffering on my birth. When I started my school, the very first day I was humiliated, discriminated from my other colleagues and community because I was a Dalit. I was so humiliated when I could not drink the water from the same tap. I was discriminated and humiliated when I was exercising my fundamental religious rights. When I visited the temples, I was so humiliated, and those painful humiliation and the experience motivated me to move against the caste-based discrimination and injustice. That's why today we are here to fight against the caste-based discrimination and injustice. And this is the history of not only this is the history of 260 million Dalit men and women who have been living in the South Asia and other part of the world, who born as a Dalit and who born under the so-called lower caste. They have been suffering under the discrimination of caste and descent and gender violence in their day-to-day life. I would like to recite the recent history of India. Two young ladies who were raped and killed because they were born in a Dalit caste by the so-called upper caste boys. And this is a history of many Dalit women and girls, our sisters and mothers and daughters. Therefore, we are here, and I would like to recall the Mr. President. I urge you to speak up and take a stance against this horrific caste-based act against these young ladies and the many sisters and daughters who are your and who are my too. I urge the United States to stand together with us to fight against the caste-based discrimination, injustice, and the violence. I urge the Mr. President to endorse the UN draft resolution, the principle and guidelines against the caste-based discrimination. I also urge you to encourage the member states of the United Nations to endorse and apply as international obligations. Today, I also remember the civil rights movement in the United States against the racial discrimination, injustice, and inequality led by the Dr. King. I also remember the movement against the apartheid, which is led by the Nelson Mandela in Africa. I also remember the movement of the emancipation in the United States led by the Abraham Lincoln. I remember the Dr. Ambedkar, who led the movement against the caste-based discrimination, anti-racism, and anti-slaveryism, who was a Dalit son and who was an independent leader and the constitutional architecture of modern day of India. We call the Mr. President, you do the business with the India and the other country, but you should not be silent violence against the millions of people who have been suffering based on the caste. Today, this is the global march against the caste-based discrimination, and it is a part of this proud tradition of civil rights activism. We stand committed today to continue our activism until our sisters and brothers have their dignity and equality without fear, without their caste, without their race, and without any discrimination. I do believe that race and caste discrimination are two sides of a coin, and this movement is a movement of freedom and equality. And I believe deeply that the US leadership was key for the providing progressive social justice, democracy, freedom, and liberty. And I am certain the US Congress will hear our voice and pass a binding resolution against the caste-based discrimination, sexual violence against the Dalit. We call the US Congress to take a step to support the human rights for all by passing a binding resolution against the caste-based discrimination. And we have a right to defend our brothers and sisters. The wall of injustice and discrimination must be broken down, and we must promote the dignity and equality for all. Finally, we urge the American citizens, ask your congressional members to speak of and to support the passage of binding resolutions against the caste-based discrimination. I thanks for you for your decision to join this global march, and our effort would not be possible without your support, without your participation in this global march. And this is a beginning of the new start of the social justice movement. I thank you for you, and thank you.